Boom, it's showtime. Welcome in, everybody, to the official Butthole Podcast, powered by the great people at the Blue Collar Media Group. As we teased earlier, we're getting into this tonight. The Vikings say no to Harbaugh, or did Harbaugh say no to the Vikings? That's the big question. And then we're also going to be breaking down the new Minnesota Vikings head coach, reported by damn near everybody except the team because they can't report it yet. Fellas, what's up?
Not much. Excited to be here. Talk a little bit of Vikings. We've had a couple days of excitement, followed by a little disappointment last night, to more excitement today. So I'm excited.
Yeah, just along for the ride on the roller coaster. It's been a lot of emotional ups and downs, and I think maybe a little leveling off today now.
And for those of you who don't know, this is Big Cato. He's become a staple of the Butthole, mostly on Twitter. He helps interact with us. You had a little bit of a thing going on yesterday with the khakis, Big Cato. Why don't you get into that a little bit?
Oh, and I wish I could have ended it, but a day in the life of khakis, which were anyone who's a follower of Jim Harbaugh, it's everyday wear. That's how you get down to quote unquote business time, baby. And we took a journey because yesterday was going to be a big day, which it was, just took a different twist than we thought. But woke up, put my pants on one leg at a time like everyone else in the khakis. We had a big day. Started off running some errands at Costco, fueling up at Caribou with our favorite coffee drink, and was all ready with pep in our step to listen to some Hamilton. Looking forward to the Jim Harbaugh signing and the offensive coordinators. We went to Total Wine to celebrate by picking up some Jim Beam, and we're going to head to TCO and Omni Hotel Bar to end the night. And news cut town that hashtag Khaki Watch left town without a deal. And here's where we stand.
So, Brandon, what was the roller coaster ride like for you yesterday? Was it anticipation all day?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, obviously we had 8 hours with defensive coordinator Graham from the Giants that came in on Tuesday. They chatted for a long time, and then they invited Harbaugh in, and they're like, "Hey, man, come in, take a seat on my couch. Let's talk for 9 hours. Let me, spin around real quick. Show me what you're all about, Jim." And they talked for a long time. I think they said 9 hours before Harbaugh walked out. But from the beginning, I've been excited for a change. Obviously, Zimmer and Spielman we had for a long time, Spielman longer than Zimmer, but for the past 6-7 years, it's been a lot of the same. And kind of canning both in the front office, I was excited for the next chapter, regardless of who that was going to be. I trusted that the Wilfs are going to put us in a better position to win, or do what they think is going to put us in a position to win. So Harbaugh was a fun, flashy name. I would have been excited for him, but there was a lot of concerns with the guy as well. So for me, it wasn't super disappointing when it didn't work out because I do like Kevin O'Connell. I'm excited for that. But Harbaugh would have been a big name that Minnesota hasn't had in a long time.
For me, actually, on the podcast that we recorded Monday night,
they did put Harbaugh on that casting couch. That's how they do all their interviews. It's a good, thorough way to do it, Kaylee.
And they don't discriminate. Graham was on the casting couch too. Harbaugh just happened to be the last guy on the casting couch.
Harbaugh sat down. He's like, "Why is this couch all sticky?" And they're like, don't worry about it. He spilled a drink.
Yeah, you don't ask questions, Harbaugh. On a second note, why don't you just leave? Go back to Michigan.
Yeah, just go back to Michigan, okay?
So I actually had on Monday night, I was sure Harbaugh was going to be the head coach. So I even broke it on the podcast. I said, I'm saying right now, Jim Harbaugh will be the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, and the press conference will be on Friday. The timeline on everything worked out perfectly. The small little detail I forgot is that he actually has to sign a contract and agree to it.
You had a parade all lined up for Minnesota too.
Well, the thing is, I had what I thought was and we're not going to make this all about me, but I had what I thought was a perfect timeline, and it made too much sense. The problem was I forgot exactly what the Wilfs said in their press conference after they announced the firing of Zimmer and Spielman and introduced Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and talking about being collaborative, trying to get a little bit more in the analytics world. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah himself actually said this is going to be more of a collaboration. I think what they ended up finding out yesterday as they sat down and talked with Harbaugh for 9 hours was it was mutual on both sides, but they realized it just wasn't a great match, period.
Absolutely.
Here's one of my coworkers goes, we had to mop up Scotty's tears at work all day. It's true. It was a tough day for me, man. Yes, last night was tough and today was tough too. But hey, I'm excited about O'Connell. I don't mean to just brush over that. We'll get into that here in a little bit. What do you got to say, Big Kiddo?
The roller coaster for me was before last weekend when Harbaugh's name officially entered the mix. I was absolutely convinced it was O'Connell. We had all these defensive candidates that were a part of the mix. And I think pretty much everyone in the fan base is like, what's going on here? And these are all defensive guys. Some of them previous head coaching stints. This didn't feel like the vibe when we got rid of Zimmer that we were going to go young offensive. And O'Connell's name was the one offensive guy that kept hanging around. It's like, there's a reason for that. And then, boom, Saturday came with all the Harbaugh news. And I was like, he's legit. I started getting excited, but I'm like, what are the odds that it works out? And then all the puzzle pieces were, to Brett Favre, pieces in place. It was, he's actually flying to Minnesota to do an interview, which is on college football NCAA National Signing Day. And to me, that's what then totally entered my head. It's like, this is going down. This isn't happening otherwise. We kept hearing he was willing to sign, but the Wilfs had to be sold still. This interview was important. And that was the part that everyone still felt like it was a formality. And then it's going 9 hours. And even though Graham went 9 hours the day before, it's like, well, they're just lining up the contract. They're going to get the press conference rolling for Thursday today here. That's why it's going so long for him. And then instantly, he's left. He's going back to Michigan. And it was like a bomb went off. It was just total crazy. But it ended up being O'Connell. So I guess in the end, it's the young offensive coach that so many fans thought was going to be the direction.
With Harbaugh, I mean, obviously, there's questions that surround the guy. So, like Kyle said, I think everybody in Minnesota thought it was a formality. Bring him in, make it look like a second interview, chat, work through the contract details, and sign him just because of the way everything kind of lined up. But they've been very thorough in this whole thing, and them saying that they don't want Harbaugh. And I know it was a voting system because there's multiple people involved in deciding what was going on in the organization. But the majority said, hey, let's pump the brakes here. Let's go a different direction. But Harbaugh, he's kind of had an issue with having a tenure longer than 4 or 5 years. So concerning that he wants to come to Minnesota, maybe that's only a 3-4 year deal before he's like, hey, man, I want to go somewhere else. Or maybe it just doesn't really work out. The second thing with him is his personality is love or hate, in my opinion. There's a lot of people that love his hoorah, kind of hard-nosed attitude. There's a lot of people that he rubs the wrong way. So bringing him into Minnesota was kind of risky, in my opinion, with a locker room that said they wanted a better environment than Zimmer. That doesn't mean Harbaugh was going to bring in the same or a worse environment, but it is kind of concerning because he is love or hate. So that could easily divide a locker room. And then
I think, yeah, sorry.
Keep going. And then Kwesi, he's got the personnel say. And I know Kyle mentioned in our group chats earlier is the fear would be, does Harbaugh play well with others? Is he willing to let Kwesi make the decisions with advisement from Harbaugh, or is he going to try to hard-nose it and want the decisions to be his way versus what Kwesi wants this organization to look like as well? And how is that going to interact and mesh? And with those things kind of concerning, I can see why the team didn't go that direction.
Yeah, I think the disconnect between the Vikings and Harbaugh coming out of Saturday was twofold. One, Harbaugh thought he was coming here to get a job. He was coming here not just for an interview, but he was coming to get the job. And number two, I have no doubt that the Vikings had real interest in Harbaugh, but I don't for 1 second think, and it came true yesterday, that the Vikings were going to just interview him. And if the interview went good, they were going to give him the job. I think Harbaugh had to win the job, and they just realized yesterday while deliberating that O'Connell and Graham had just as good of a chance as Harbaugh did of winning the job. And if you talk to the guys in the if you talk to this committee that the Vikings had for hiring a head coach, they would all probably tell you that Harbaugh, I would think, was actually third out of those three. I think they had Graham and O'Connell ahead of Harbaugh. They clearly had O'Connell, but I think Graham ended up ahead of Harbaugh too after the interview and everything.
I think that sounds about right. The one thing that I wanted to finish my opinion on the Harbaugh side of it is, if you're all in the social media today, the local radio, there are a lot of people who are disappointed, sore, and I think the negatives coming out are the new GM was the one with the connection with Harbaugh. He wanted him, but the Wilfs went a different direction. How could you do that with the GM? And I think that is super short-sighted and not on the mark. What have we even mentioned a bunch? Collaboration. That's what this new regime is going to be all about. Kwesi is all about getting facts and information, and that's working with his team. And there was a lot of the team that was not sold on Harbaugh. He took that in. And what I heard straight up was, when it came down to the final vote and it was Kwesi, he casted it for O'Connell. So right there, that was his guy, even though he had the connection with Harbaugh. It's not like the Wilfs overrode him or anything like that. He took in all the info and he went with O'Connell too.
And it doesn't hurt to bring in Harbaugh and chat with him. They had a connection. He's obviously a big name. There's interest in leaving Michigan. So there's no harm in bringing the guy in to interview and to do it twice and to be thorough about whether or not he's the right fit. Turns out he wasn't, according to what they're looking for. And I know I teased it in our group chat, Scott, but to me, Harbaugh, the excitement around Harbaugh and possibly signing him felt a lot like 2018 when we went out and we signed Kirk after our championship loss to the Eagles. And it kind of had that same vibe to me of like, this is exciting. This is the missing puzzle piece. And Harbaugh felt to me like we're heading in the same direction we were with Zimmer, hoping for different results. We're not getting rid of Cousins. We're going to keep a majority of the same players on roster, make a few adjustments, and hope his coaching style and his strategy with whatever offensive coordinator he brings in is going to yield different results than what we had with Zimmer. And as a fan, when we started this whole thing out, it's not really the direction I wanted to go. I wanted to get a different young offensive-minded coordinator, like O'Connell, as you can see here, who's reportedly going to be the new head coach. I think that when you go defensive coordinator and you have to bring in OCs to run the offense, those OCs get opportunities when your team has success. So that's the guy that's going to get poached. That's going to be the Sean McVay. It's going to be the Kyle Shanahan, the what's his first name? LaFleur.
Matt LaFleur.
Matt LaFleur. It's those type of guys that are going to get the head coaching jobs elsewhere. And now you're scrambling like we have been, 7 times in the last 6 years. We've had to get 7 different offensive coordinators. Kirk hasn't had one in his tenure with the Vikings for more than one season with the same guy. One full season, I should say. I think Stefanski was the closest one. So maybe he had a year and a half. But still, when we keep alternating with that and you keep changing the offensive system, the offense has a really hard time adjusting to that if you're continuously changing it. Clint from Gary to Clint, it wasn't as bad because I think they had a lot of the same tendencies, and Clint obviously learned from his dad. So that wasn't as much of a drastic change, but I think it's a lot easier to find a defensive coordinator to come in and build a solid defense than it is to find a new offensive coordinator every couple of years.
I agree with that for sure.
The thing is, coming into the search for head coach, the Minnesota Vikings were thinking, well, let's just from a fan's perspective. We had Mike Zimmer for 8 years. We had Rick Spielman for about 15, I think it was. We were all looking for an offensive guy, like Brandon said. I think everybody was pretty keened in on O'Connell, even though there was other names floating around too. But on last Saturday, which was now, 5-6 days ago, when Harbaugh's name came up, for one, it kind of came out of nowhere. And for two, he had been linked to the Las Vegas Raiders. He had been linked to the Chicago Bears, and nothing came of that. So when Jim Harbaugh's name came up on Saturday, it was exciting because, for one, the report started leaking out of Quasi Defomensa being the one that was kind of driving the ship for Harbaugh. And then two, it was confirmed fairly quickly that Harbaugh had real interest in getting the Minnesota job. The ironic thing to me was that it was, an hour after Harbaugh reportedly called Michigan last night that the Minnesota Vikings told Kevin O'Connell, it's your job. It was kind of like bang, bang.
Yeah.
So
that
the Minnesota Vikings – sorry, go Kyle.
That caught me off guard, how quick it was like, yep, we're moving on to the guy now.
The thing is like it kind of seemed like the Vikings did exactly what they set out to do. They did their due diligence. They interviewed the candidates. They got down to their final list. Harbaugh kind of took an irregular path to the end result. But in the end, I think the Vikings did a good job of interviewing the guys that they wanted to interview, and they landed on Kevin O'Connell. And if you listen to some of the things people have to say about Kevin O'Connell, for instance, Joe Theismann said today that Kevin O'Connell is an absolute rock star and he's going to be a great head coach. Some of the reports around the Los Angeles Rams offensive game planning and scheming are actually Kevin O'Connell completely installs and does all the brunt work on the front end for the Los Angeles Rams game plans every week. He's very involved. He's not the play caller, that's McVay, but he's very involved. So from the perspective of looking at it like, okay, did the Vikings get the right guy? Obviously, time will tell. O'Connell's never been a head coach. But if you're plucking a head coach out of the Sean McVay tree, you're in a pretty good spot. And I'm excited about it. I really am. The only thing I'm a little concerned about is they're not able to continue working on the rest of his coaching staff until after the Super Bowl because they can't make it official until then. And we've already seen the Vikings. Clint Kubiak got poached to Denver, which I don't think anybody was sad about. The one that sucks a little bit is Sam Ficken, the special teams coordinator, got poached. That one sucks. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Vikings end up doing for the rest of the coaching staff. We're doing awesome, Malachi. How are you? But outside of that, I'm excited for O'Connell. It just ended up being a little more fireworks to get there because a name like Jim Harbaugh entered the fray.
What was the one thing that stood out the most about the Rams offense this year to you guys?
Well, the biggest piece that they were missing was Stafford. So obviously when you're looking at a comparison to 2020 to 21, the way that Matthew Stafford was able to control that offense, because Jared Goff, he was drug along by the defense. He was fortunate enough to be on a team that had a solid roster around him, and he was like the Jimmy Garoppolo of the Rams, where not a terrible quarterback, but not going to propel you over the top. And Stafford was able to step in and do that. So, I mean, obviously the resurgence of Cooper Kupp this year, when it's hard to say how much is that from the offense and how much is that from Stafford coming in, because it was night and day difference. But Stafford and Malachi here commented as well, saying Stafford for sure. But Cooper Kupp took a big step from last year to this year. And I think we can see that same type of trajectory for Justin Jefferson, who's already had 2 good years, but he could be poised for another big one. What I don't know, what concerns me, or what I'm kind of looking at with this team, is once O'Connell's official, once he builds out his staff, where are we heading? because I think there's a lot of Vikings fans that are saying, all right, let's move on from Kirk. Let's possibly take some sort of other journeyman, maybe be dog shit for a year or two, rebuild this, find a guy, move forward. There's other people that want to keep Kirk Cousins and see what maybe O'Connell can do with him and see what success we can find, having somebody else leading the helm. So to me, that's the biggest piece, and what's most interesting to me is where are we moving forward at quarterback? A lot of people think that we're keeping him. A lot of people think he's getting traded. The Steelers are an option, maybe the Saints. I've heard trading to the 49ers for Trey Lance. I've seen reports of that being a possibility, which I'm all in for, by the way.
Yeah.
Here's the thing you got to watch with the 49ers is there's rumors circulating that John Lynch might jump to a TV gig and leave the 49ers as GM.
Ooh, wow.
If that were to happen, that would almost guarantee Kyle Shanahan would then have more power. I'm sure they would still hire a GM, but in that struggle, I'm sure Kyle Shanahan would get more power. Everybody that knows anything about Kyle Shanahan and Kirk Cousins know Kyle Shanahan loves Kirk Cousins.
Yeah,
so I think there's a much better chance that if John Lynch leaves, the San Francisco 49ers could potentially trade for Kirk Cousins. I think if John Lynch stays, I don't think John Lynch would let Kyle Shanahan trade Trey Lance for Kirk Cousins.
So last year, there was rumors that instead of trading for Stafford, the Rams made offers or at least inquired about trading for Cousins. And that O'Connell was a reason that we didn't trade for Cousins because he wasn't for him.
Oh.
So do you guys think that leads more to us possibly moving on from Kirk because O'Connell didn't want him then? Why hold on to him now? I just don't want to be stuck in the middle. I don't want to be in that draft pick between 10 and 23. I either want to be below that, which I don't want to be below that, or I want to be competing 32. For a championship.
Yeah. Here's the thing with O'Connell and Kirk. They had an overlap in Washington in 2017. O'Connell was the quarterback's coach at the time in Washington. Kirk Cousins was obviously still there as well. That was Kirk Cousins' worst statistical season he's ever had, was 2017. Besides maybe his second year in the league when RG3 had his injury issues. But O'Connell's seen the bad in Kirk. And the biggest thing with me and Kirk Cousins is if you look at the box score, Kirk Cousins has good box scores. The difference is when you actually get to know him as a player, which I'm completely speaking outside of the loop here. I'm obviously not in the Vikings locker room. This is all just things that I've been hearing. Is his DNA as a player isn't quote unquote winning DNA. That's why a lot of people don't think he's ever going to win a Super Bowl, is because he's very concerned about making sure the offense stays in structure, not making the big mistake. And obviously, if you're a fan and you watch the Vikings every Sunday, you see it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
so the bottom line is
with Tom Brady, as Gage's Rage said on episode, what was it, 295? Maybe if Tom Brady came over and fucked him, he might get some winning DNA in him.
That's true. That would happen. So, and then the other thing is basically Kevin O'Connell. He's very much an analytics guy, but he's a football coach too. And he knows Kirk Cousins as well as anybody. Darren Doogie Wolfson, who's as tied into the Minnesota Vikings and local sports as anybody in Minnesota. He's a very good reporter. He says as of right now, today, he can't guarantee anything because nothing's imminent, nor has he heard anything. But if he was a gambling man, he would put his money on Kirk Cousins being traded.
Oh.
Where are the top landing spots for Kirk Cousins?
I think, honestly, the dark lookout for is Carolina. They are very desperate. They have a coaching staff there that needs to win now. I would love to trade Kirk to Carolina.
Did Matt Ja Rule, is he still around there? Or did he get let go?
He is.
He's still around? Give him a little more shot.
He's hanging on by a string.
Well, and do you think that possibly is a reason that we didn't trade Cousins last offseason as well? Is because Spielman and Zimmer, they couldn't afford to get rid of a quarterback and not be competitive.
Yeah.
So instead of doing what's best for the team, they held on to him to save their jobs.
That was the unfortunate part of all last season for the Vikings. It was two guys fighting to push hard and keep their jobs, and I mean, everyone wants to win, but I think they were unrealistic on where the roster was at. And it basically was a lost season. And that's how I'm going to look back at it as was we didn't have all the bullets in the chamber, yet they were going for it. So that set the team back, no doubt about it. And the positive thing that they have going for them is it is a lot easier to trade Kirk's contract this year now. So it is more of a possibility than it even was last year. So if Quincy wants to go that route, yeah, it definitely can happen if they find the right partner.
Do you think
Here's the
that's
big
more
question.
of a,
Sorry.
do you think it's a trade with the implication that he needs to restructure with whatever team he goes to?
I think that, yeah, Kirk is in the mindset like he is all about the status of the contract. And if there's a team, let's say Carolina, for example, were to trade for him, he's like, nope, we got to set up a new deal. And as a part of the trade, I think they would have to do that with him. So yeah, that would be their own new contract that they set up.
But he doesn't have a no trade clause. He not like Russell Wilson or Deshaun
He did.
Watson, right?
He did the year before, but not this year.
So what does he really have to say about if we want to trade him? I understand that the team most likely is going to have some sort of handshake agreement that, hey, let's work out a deal that we're going to both be happy with. But at the end of the day, they don't really have to do that. We can still trade him to the Panthers and offload his contract, get whatever we get in return. I know Scott's a big Sam Darnold fan, so maybe we'll get Sam Darnold in return. And just move forward and not have to deal with it anymore. I mean, he doesn't really have that much of a say in where he's going at this point.
But I think it does behoove the Vikings to find a team that would want to trade and extend him because then they'd be willing to potentially give up more.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at us right now, the Bears, they have a young second-year quarterback. We don't really know what Justin Fields is going to be. They hired a defensive coordinator as their head coach. They obviously got Ryan Poles as their new GM. But they're not projected to be the number one in the division. We got the same thing going on with the Lions, who have Jared Goff. We don't really know where they're going, but we can kind of assume that they're not going to make giant leaps going into next year. And then Rodgers is rumored, and Devontae Adams, to both be out of Green Bay next year and moving forward with Jordan Love. So,
what's up, Ernest?
do we take a big risk moving on from Kirk this year when we have the best chance of winning the division as we've had since Rodgers has been taken over the team?
That's dude. That's got to be the question that they're having conversations about inside Twin City Orthopedic Center right now.
To me, I know the direction I'm going. All right. If you were to, my gut is he's going to be our quarterback next year. I know that's not what people want. I want to trade Kirk Cousins. That's my personal opinion on what I want to have happen. But I feel like he will be the Vikings starting quarterback next season. But how many more years are they going to go? Eventually, we do need a young quarterback of the future. So I want to start that right now and get it rolling. So in the next couple of years, we have our stud that we're able to just keep building the team around.
Which I agree with, and I think it's easier to say that we can just find a stud than it is to actually find one. I mean, burrows don't grow on trees. Mahomes don't grow on trees. Like they're not just – you don't just find them around every corner.
But you start taking your shots now.
There's not a lot of elite quarterbacks in the league. There's very few, and there's a lot of above average, and there's a lot of average and a few bad. To Ernest's point here is, I don't know. A lot of us don't feel like we can. I mean, you get the right situation, the perfect storm, anything can happen. Joe Flacco won one. Eli Manning won two. I mean, average quarterbacks can win Super Bowls when they get hot at the right time. So anything's possible. I mean, you look at quarterbacks you think would have won more than one. You think every year Aaron Rodgers could win in Green Bay. And, it's fun to say, but they have embarrassing playoff loss after embarrassing playoff loss. So it's really, you get in the playoffs, that's chip, chair, and a chance. If you're playing wild card weekend, you got 4 games you got to play. And you focus on this game. And if you win, you got one less game that you need to play to win that Super Bowl. So if I'm a betting man, I'm saying probably not, but anything can happen. And if you can beat up on your division and possibly get a high seed, you might get a couple of games at home in the playoffs, and that goes a long ways. And we have a very loud stadium.
Yep.
So really with the Vikings, to me, there's 2 routes this offseason. I'm like you guys. I know which path I would go. Route 1 is trade Kirk Cousins, relieve the $35 million cap hit, let some other team take that on. You still carry $10 million in dead cap, so then you have to find out a replacement for Kirk. I'm for that. I think you trade Kirk Cousins. The problem is now, okay, what do you do at quarterback?
Marcus Mariota.
That would be one option. He's a name I like. The other would be a trade of 5th or whatever for a Gardner Minshew and see what O'Connell can do with a Gardner Minshew for a season with a roster that's pretty good. Because Minshew's only time he's ever had a real chance was in Jacksonville. What's up, Brandon?
What does Mariota do for us, though? Like, if we're looking to not be in the middle, Mariota has a better chance of keeping us in the middle than Kirk does. I mean,
I agree with that wholeheartedly, too.
Propel us farther forward than Kirk.
But he's cheaper.
That's a great point.
And he gives you the time at least, like a good, solid veteran while you try and find that quarterback in the future. They got to take shot after shot till they get it. And I want to start now in case you don't get Burrow or, you don't get the surefire one right away. You got to keep trying. So I want to start that now. And Mariota's cheaper than Cousins, so saves you money.
But if he still keeps us in the middle, he might keep us on the lower end of middle, but we still don't want to be in the middle. To me, it's if you're going to take a shot on a guy, give him, Kellen Mond. If you like him, which I've heard bad things in the organization about him, his throwing mechanics, they weren't able to change it like they wanted to. But if you think that he's got a shot, throw him in there. If it's not working out, move on and find a new guy. But if it's not working out, odds are you're going to be closer to a bottom 5 team than you are to be team 15, 16, 17, 18, which is going to put you in a better chance to find your next Burrow, your next Mahomes, your next Josh Allen.
So you're all right with the bottom out year for the betterment of the future then?
In my lifetime, the Vikings really haven't had we haven't had a rebuild. We've had a couple of down years where we've drafted higher. Matt Khalil, I think, might have been the highest draft pick we've had in
pick 4.
Yeah, in my experience of paying attention to the Vikings, which has been for like 25 years now. But we haven't gone through a rebuild. And to that point, we also haven't found great success in what we've been doing. Closest thing was with Favre and with Case Keenum. With the, we had 98 as well, but that was like right at the beginning of my fandom. But we haven't had a true rebuild and trying to find this guy. We've had a couple of opportunities at it, but we haven't really been a bottom 5 team since I've been watching football. So I'm okay with a couple of bad years if it means that we're going to move forward and find our guy.
I would agree with that. I would also say this. I don't think for 1 second Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell are coming into this thinking they got to hit the ground running and win now. I think their mental mindset on this is, okay, let's clean up some cap situation that we have going on because we have one of the least amount of cap spaces in the league. If the Minnesota Vikings played their cards right, and this leads me to option number 2, rather than just trade Kirk and clear $35 million, this is the other option, which as Vikings fans, we're not going to like hearing this right now, but it is probably for the betterment of the team overall. Keep Kirk Cousins on a 1-year deal and expect to draft a quarterback with pick 12 or move up to get one, whatever it might be. You have Kirk play on 1-year deal with his current contract the way it is. But in order to do that and to actually field a decent team around him, you're looking at probably cutting or restructuring 2 of these 4 players I'm about to name. Harrison Smith, Danielle Hunter, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. Possibly Michael Pierce.
Plus cap mill right now.
Possibly Michael Pierce instead of Dalvin Cook. I would be fine moving on from Michael Pierce. He's been hurt a lot. But
and he obviously sat out the first year. For Ernest's point, Dak has just got more football ability, and he feels like he wants to win more. I don't think Kirk doesn't want to win, but I don't know if he necessarily has that same fire that we're looking for in a quarterback. But I could definitely see your sentiment because he's got one playoff win since becoming quarterback in 2016. I think that's when he was drafted.
What's Dak's age, though? Dak's only 28. Quarterbacks don't really hit their prime until around where Dak is. So
that's like the start of a prime for a quarterback. So I think you still have more life left in him than we obviously do in Cousins. So I wouldn't be as worried about that, but I feel the sentiment.
And I don't know if that's coming from the Minnesota side, but I think the Vikings fan would be like, we'll take Dak here in a heartbeat. But I get where you're coming from, Ernest, that you haven't reached that next level that you thought you were going to with him yet.
The thing about Dak is his contract. And I know the cap is slowly going up every year, but we talked about it on Monday, and I said the same thing. When a quarterback wants to make as much money as they're making right now, which I understand because you have a short lifespan. Not a lot of guys can play as long as 10, 15 years, which kind of seems to be the standard for the good quarterbacks nowadays. But you have a short window to make your money. But when you do that, $40 million a year is taking away from a couple contracts you could give to guys that are going to be nice pieces to help your team. So we talk about Kirk's desire to win and taking money, but you can also look at that with Josh Allen's contract, Dak's contract, Mahomes, and what he's going to be getting paid when he starts taking his massive cap hits. And ultimately, they're going to end up having to cut players on their team that they really need to be competitive and win a Super Bowl.
There's so many tough choices.
For our contract situation, I think Daniil's getting 22, Thielen and Harrison are getting in the high teens, Cook's getting like 12, and Michael Pierce is getting somewhere around 10. We talked about Kirk's contract being so massive, but those guys are taking up a big chunk of the pie as well.
I wish I could remember.
Somebody's hammered drunk.
No, you probably don't want to click on that link. I would not recommend it.
I wish I could remember what it is, but off the top of my head, I don't. When the Vikings and Hunter redid his contract before last season, I don't remember the part of it, but I will tell you this, heading into this year, it's not going to be just he stays on that deal. It's either going to be a new massive deal or he is traded, released in some fashion, because there's some part of it that makes it almost impossible to stay at whatever that deal is heading into this year now. So,
but is it irresponsible to give him a big deal right now after he missed all of 2020 and he missed over half of 2021? I think he played 8 games in the last 2 years. To give him a massive deal is a major risk. I know he's a beast when he's on the field. I know he's still fairly young. He's like 27, maybe 28. But to extend him, to give him something like Joey Bosa money, like Myles Garrett money, you're taking a major risk and you're going to put yourself in a big pinch if he's not playing.
Here's the issue the Vikings have with Daniil Hunter. Daniil Hunter signed that contract with the Vikings last offseason thinking he was going to be healthy and have a good year.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, massive contract. That didn't happen. So now the Vikings are looking at it like, okay, we can extend this guy on a completely just totally incentive-based contract. This is the Vikings' perspective on it. Completely incentive-based contract. It'd be good for us. Hopefully we do pay him a lot of money, because if we pay him a lot of money, it means he's playing and he's playing well. From Daniil's perspective, Daniil Hunter already signed a big extension with the Minnesota Vikings that he was playing much better than he was getting paid on his first contract extension he signed with the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to be a really interesting topic of conversation for this offseason, because I don't think Daniil Hunter is going to be excited about signing an extension with a team that he already gave a sort of quote unquote break to. So there will be a crossroads point this offseason with Daniil Hunter.
And right now,
Absolutely.
he doesn't have ties in the organization with anybody that brought him on. Spielman's
No.
gone. Zimmer's gone. The guys that helped bring him in and mold him, they're not here anymore. And if we are going through a rebuild, there's a lot of these players that probably don't want to stick around. Why would Harrison Smith want to stay on a team that might go through 3-4 years of shit when he's on the end of his contract, or the end of his back nine of his career, I should say? Daniel Hunter entering the kind of middle of his prime. Why would he still want to be here? Adam Thielen, if he wants a ring, he's got that hometown, love, grew up a Vikings fan, the heartwarming story, obviously, but these players aren't young anymore. Daniil the exception. So why would they necessarily want to stay through 3-4 years of shit and not make money doing it?
I'm trying to pull up here what Daniil Hunter's contract is for this season via overthecap.com, which is phenomenal when you're trying to figure out cap situations.
Yep.
Long story short, with Daniil, he's due like $18 million at the beginning of the new league year, and his total cap hit is 22. So you got to make a decision with him before the new league year begins, which is, I think, the beginning of March.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they're gonna have to get Kevin O'Connell signed to a contract here, and he's gonna have to hit the ground running because you got a big decision to make on Daniil. You got a massive decision to make on Kirk. Harrison Smith just signed an extension, but you can get out of that extension. There's gonna be a lot of decisions made this offseason for the Minnesota Vikings, and so that's where part of like me being bummed about not getting Harbaugh. Most of the reason I wanted Harbaugh was because one, he's got the winning experience, but two, it was gonna make for a fun offseason. This offseason, from a Vikings perspective, is still going to be an extremely fun offseason.
It's going to be interesting to see where we go. I don't have much left, but I want to know, do you think it's I can't remember what his first name is, but Graham, or do you think it's Fangio coming in as defensive coordinator?
So my guess is neither.
Really?
So maybe I'm wrong. I thought I saw a report a few days ago, or it was last week, that if Patrick Graham did not get a head coaching position, that Dable and the Giants were going to keep him as their coordinator. So I'm guessing
being reported today too that Graham's staying with the Giants.
Yep. So I think that ship's gone. And as much as hey, every single Vikings fan I think wants McVangio as defensive coordinator. That was one of the most fun parts of thinking Harbaugh coming here, that we would have the best defensive coordinator. But I think with how close he is with Harbaugh and that not working out, I don't think the chances are all that good that he comes here.
One guy to keep an eye on for the potential defensive coordinator for the Vikings that I've been seeing is Wade Phillips. Wade Phillips was the D coordinator for McVay when he first got the job with the Rams, and Kevin O'Connell might tap on Wade Phillips to come in for a year or two so that O'Connell can focus on the offense and establishing an identity for this team, and let Wade Phillips handle the defensive side because he does have a lot of experience.
I do want to give props to two guys, D'Amico Ryans and Dan Quinn, for choosing to stay with the team instead of just going out and taking the first available head coaching job that came. I don't think he was offered, obviously, with the Vikings, but I think it says a lot about these guys if they're in a situation that they enjoy and they like, and that they're going to stay and try and hone their skills in before just jumping ship to the first head coach job that comes their way. So Dan Quinn did a good job with that Dallas defense, and obviously the 49ers have been successful for quite a while on defense, but D'Amico Ryans did a really good job with that team. Brought them to the NFC Championship game, and we can all say that defense was carrying that team in the playoffs. They were the reason that they were competitive and in the game. So he'll get his shot here in a couple of years if he wants it, but good for him for staying.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for D'Amico Ryans is he just feels like he wants to get a little more coordinating experience under his belt so that he can find a truly good spot to be a head coach and feel like he's prepared for it, because he hasn't been in the league very long. He just retired not that long ago. So good for D'Amico.
D'Amico is, his star is going to burn bright. I think what he learned going through this process with the Vikings is, besides just your coaching and leadership skills, you actually need to bring a staff with you. And I don't think he was as prepared on that end. And I guarantee this next year he's going to be networking and building his plan that way, and then he'll be ready to roll.
Most people, they see that
yeah.
shiny light hanging in front of them and they just take it. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is exciting. A promotion. Let's go. But not everybody is ready for it. I think that's why we see a handful of coaches fail that are newer because they're just not ready to jump in and take over a team, and they don't have quite as many connections as some of these other guys. So him to build that it's smart on his part.
Absolutely. Do you guys have any closing thoughts here before we wrap this thing up?
Skull Vikings, fuck the Packers. Let's go.
Well, I do have a point on that you bring up the Packers. Oh, how lovely is it to see all of their position coaches being picked and brought to other teams. You don't think that helps sway Aaron Rodgers' decision on which way he's going to go? So you love to see that end of it.
I do think that it all comes together because with Rodgers leaving or the rumors of him leaving, I think these guys also want to leave because they know he's what's holding this team. Because you talk about LaFleur, and a lot of people love LaFleur. He's had a lot of success. Hasn't lost back-to-back games, I don't think, since becoming a head coach. Has a really good record. But what's that going to look like when you don't have one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league throwing the ball for your team? Is Jordan Love that guy? They're probably going to endure a handful of 6-11, 7-10 seasons coming up here. And I think a lot of these players, Adams doesn't want to stick around there. He wants to go probably play with Rodgers or have a different opportunity somewhere else. I think a lot of these pending free agents that they're going to have are going to jump ship. Their coordinators are jumping ship. I really think they're going to be in for a tough time coming up here in the next few years.
Yeah, the Packers will at least have one rough season, I think, with Jordan Love. And then they'll decide, okay, he's showing some promise or he's not the guy. But I think if I'm a betting man, I would say it's a 75% chance Aaron Rodgers goes somewhere else.
We're going to know before free agency starts, I think. He's going to announce it here. I think he said before the new league year, he was going to announce what his plan was. And I think Denver could be a landing spot, but to me, I don't think I would go there. You're going to have to play against Mahomes twice. You're going to have to play against Justin Herbert twice. You're going to have to play against Derek Carr and the Raiders, who they're not a bad team.
Newly Josh McDaniels-led Raiders.
They're a gritty team. You're going to have to face Josh Allen in the playoffs. You're going to have to face Joe Burrow in the playoffs, possibly Lamar Jackson. I mean, you got a lot of good teams that you're going to be going against year after year. And honestly, the NFC has been somewhat of a cakewalk for quite a while now. There hasn't been too many teams that have been powerhouses in the NFC, and he's only had a few teams that he's really had that are tough challenges. They just haven't played well in the big games.
Ironically for Rodgers, he's building a house in Tennessee. That's been a rumor. And it's also been rumored that he's open to playing for the Tennessee Titans, which I think would be a good fit. But just as you were saying, Brandon, imagine the gauntlet that would set up to get through to the Super Bowl in the AFC side of the ball game. You could have the top 6 quarterbacks statistically we'll say top 7 statistical quarterbacks in the NFL trying to get through to the Super Bowl out of the AFC side. If you include Rodgers, Mahomes, Allen, possibly Herbert, Burrow, Lamar Jackson's bound to have a bounce back season next year. He always puts up big numbers. Like, the AFC is loaded with quarterback talent.
But at least on the one part of that, it appears at this time the AFC South would be the division to be in, though, where he could rule that. So, yeah. But
2 free wins every year with the Jaguars. I mean, come on. Why wouldn't you want that? He's had it his entire career with the Lions.
Yeah.
Yep.
You got to stay a little bit true to your original roots. So, you guys got anything left to add here before we wrap up and say goodbye to the millions and millions?
That's all I got.
I'm excited for Kevin O'Connell. I'm going to call him KO. And it just, yeah, the excitement now is we have to wait until after the Super Bowl to see it all unfold. So we still have excitement building up. I'm looking forward to it.
Wouldn't you call him KOC or maybe Cock for short?
I'm that is a way to go. We can go either way.
Nothing like the head coach cock of the Minnesota Vikings. Let's go.
I think I'm sticking with that. I think it's going to stick.
It's definitely going to stick, especially if you tune into the official Butthole podcast every single week. We'll be dropping in we'll sprinkle in some live videos like this throughout the season. We'll be dropping in some cock talk, as they like to say, on the official Butthole podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe. If you're watching us on the Blue Collar Media Group channels, like and subscribe. We'll be bringing you lots of content this offseason as the Minnesota Vikings and NFL, we'll call it carousel, unfolds. It's going to be a fun offseason. And your buds here in the Butthole will be bringing you all the top news this offseason. Thank you guys so much and have a great night.
Skull.
Peace.